All
All
right,
right.
we are live.
Live and direct.
Ashton, where's your celebratory eyewear?
Let's go. I got to get my goggles. They're upstairs.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we were just spraying champagne, so I had to have the celebration, the limited edition ESPN NBA Victor Solomon victory goggles.
Oh, I see. Yeah,
much like as seen on Drewski, Jaylen Brown, and now OJ.
We love to see
Here
it.
we are.
Yeah, Oren.
Jordan, you got the Oakleys on? Are those the new Travis Scott debuted Oakleys? Or
indeed, Travis is rocking these. These are those 13-2, like craziest gnarly situations they've got. I haven't been bold enough to wear them out on the course, but
do we think Luxottica Oakley can return now that the founder sold his Brutalist mansion, or is it always going to be a downturn?
The Brutalist mansion is incredible. After going to their headquarters a month or two ago, it's pretty much his bedroom. I mean, that thing looks the same, like a Brutalist bunker. I believe in Oakley. I think they can make a comeback. We'll see. They're definitely hot and trending right now. So, they can. I think they can do it.
Are you seeing those on the Gen Z youth in the streets of New York?
I'm not seeing those. I'm not seeing a lot of shades out here on the Gen Z youth.
Yeah. What do you see in New York? What's the eyewear of the Gen Z youth?
The eyewear is tough. I can tell you hat wear, but the eyes are cleared. Just 20/20 vision.
Wow. What are the kids wearing in the hat?
The hats are.
Is this a Clear Eyes placement that we're just learning about?
The hats are Ime and Siegelman Stables.
Speaking of which, are we officially ordaining this as Horse Girl Summer? I'm doing the video this weekend. I'm curious what y'all are seeing in the streets. Are you guys seeing them Alexander McQueen horse hoof heels, or is that not made to Dallas? I already know that's live.
No, tell us about what's going on in Orange County.
Yeah, tell us about the Orange County hoof girl.
Oh, well, it's just like it's that time of year. A lot of riding crops. You know what I'm saying? A lot of quarter horses. Like a lot of dressage. A little bit of it's Olympic time, so the horse archery. Everyone's kind of getting into it, like inside the flow. But I don't really know if that is if that's something that's like just across the culture, or if that's purely an area like this.
Well, Orange County is definitely going to be one of those places. This is Americana vibes at its peak. So now we've just taken literal hooves and introduced them into the aesthetic. So Valuable Studios, high heel hoofs win.
Yeah, exactly. That's a perfect question. We'll do Valuable Stables. We'll come right for Stiegelman. It is what it is. Oh, we got a lot of people commenting here in the stream too. These are not goggles for hitting the slopes. Shout out my boy Tolga. They're purely to stop champagne from spraying. I got the afterwards of the NBA version of this.
Indeed.
But we got some questions already coming in the chat. I don't know if we want to start hitting that, or we can go into some topics. But actually, while we're here, we have the question: Oren, should an individual go to college to become a creative director like you? I'm curious about you guys. What do you guys recommend for a young creative now? Should you go the college route? Should we diving right in? Where should you work? Let's get some career advice. Launch right into it.
Yeah, let's go straight into career advice. Ashwin, I'm going to look to you. You have a good college education.
I think there's a lot on this. I've done a couple lives over the past few days, and it's just a lot of young people who are just recent grads. They want to get into marketing, but I didn't major in marketing. How should I think about my career? How should I get involved with this? I think Oren and I have a very similar kind of trajectory in the creative world. I mean, Oren kind of studied more formally some of the graphic design stuff, which you can speak about. I did not study design, marketing, any of that. I went to undergrad business school. I actually just studied finance, and everything that I learned kind of from branding, design, marketing came by doing. And so that was either at startups of my own or working on startups. It's the type of thing that once you have a foundation in place, if we're talking about creative direction, okay, there's a lot of different entry points here. So, is your entry point art? Is your entry point graphic design? Is your entry point typography? Because all of these things you're going to need to know to be a good creative director. You're going to need to be good at taste and copywriting and messaging and all this stuff. So it's less so about a formal college education that gets you there, and more so thinking about more so understanding, okay, what is my entry point? Maybe my entry point is just visual. Maybe it's photography, and I'm going to get really good at studying that, what brands are doing it well, how I think about developing a point of view or developing taste around this, and then slowly layering on skills and just trying to get as many reps as possible. And I think it's something, it's almost like an accumulated role. I don't know anyone who is 20 years old that can just, without many skills, go on and become a creative director. You just need to know a lot of different stuff, and just constantly get better over time. But I think it's a kind of space where you don't need to traditionally study something in college, and it's just kind of piecing together a lot of skills over time.
Yeah, and I think y'all's creative realm, or like, I often told people the lack of having a specialization prevented me from getting into a company like Nike. So my background at Nike in marketing, I didn't have like a clear skill that could get me in the door, but my creative generalist is what I actually believe I developed into, and what I am actually was my superpower once I got in. But you got to have that thing to stand on. And sometimes for y'all, that might be design, or that might be a real specific thing, social media. What are your thoughts, Warren?
Yeah, so I went to school for design, and I feel like if I wasn't a designer, everything would be way harder for me. That said, I went to school for design in a time when like there wasn't YouTube, right? And so the like ability to like the only way I learned Photoshop was in a like Photoshop seminar, and like we're learning a bunch of this stuff, even like industrial design was like in class. And so now today, you could probably get that skill set without that, but for me, like that was the main core thing I walked out of, was like a skill where I could go work for people and do X. You could probably learn that online now. I think it's actually more valuable to me to have entry and mid-level jobs. Like I was a designer for a restaurant group. I was a designer at an agency. I became creative director at an agency. I became content marketing at a startup. And like like that progression, if I didn't have that, I wouldn't have learned a lot. I think a lot of people are like indoctrinated now by hustle culture or whatever, or like, hey, I should just have my own business, or I get this DM, I'm sure a bunch of you guys get them too. It's like, I'm 18 years old and I started my own creative agency. And I'm like, but did you? Like that's actually a terrible idea. Is that I feel like
CEO.
in these creative jobs, you need to go actually do that, right? You need to like be in the mix with other people for like 10 years, because that's how you get the relationships and learn how people actually work and develop a toolkit.
Yeah. Let me show you guys. Of course, I've got a slide on this, but I can't show the slide. I've got a deck, but in my, I teach like how to get a dream job, and there's a last section which is like do something. So I think the swirling thing here, I think for all of us, was the skills that actually helped me set apart were not the things that were in my vertical day job. So like do the day job that you need to do, but if you want to be able to flex all those other skills, be making stuff on social, be making things in the world, have tangible things that you create and put out into the world. A lot of Oren, your YouTube content is about this. Make things, put it into the world, and you'll be amazed at how much you can be discovered just through that mechanism. The internet makes the world a very small place.
Yeah.
Yes,
and that's and one of the go ahead, Ashwin.
No, I was going to say to piggyback off Jordan's point. There's a guy who I knew pretty well, probably like 10 years ago. He was a really talented UI designer, but he did not. He was kind of self-taught, and he had like no pedigree where all the big like tech firms were hiring out of, and so I would see him basically like every week post. He's like, hey, if I worked at Snapchat, like here is how I like redesign some of their interfaces, or here's how I design a new feature. And then this was when Medium was super hot. He'd like have this Medium post that accompanied it. And he did this for Snapchat, for Twitter, for Facebook, all of these companies. If you work at those companies, he didn't have like a big following or anything. If you worked at those companies, someone of the 1,000 people that were following him sent that into like people who are working at Facebook. And he ended up just getting interviews at all of these places, went on to become a designer at Snapchat, was there for a long time, and then kind of leveled up after that. So to this point that the internet is a small place, like you don't need this super big following. And I think all of us know the power of short form content too. I've seen people who have 0 followers and they just, hey, they're like a graphic designer who's learning something. They make a video, then it's like, here's my process. Here's how I like design this thing. And all of a sudden that has 1 million views. And I'm sure their DMs are getting blown up. It's like, hey, can you design logos for me? Can you design interfaces for me? So there's a lot of opportunity, even if your immediate world is small.
Yeah, and to hit Vance's question on that. So the question he has on YouTube was quantity or quality in short form. And I think people always ask this, and I'm like, it's actually not about either of those. It's about what actually works and gets views. If you spend 20 hours making a video and it gets no views, then quality doesn't matter. You made a quality thing, it doesn't work. And if by the alternative, you put out a video every day and they don't get any views, that doesn't work. Like, all that matters is finding formats that get the people that you are trying to reach to look at it. And it may only be 100 of them or 500 of them or 5,000 of them, but like the question isn't quantity versus quality. The question is, which of those things can I get someone to watch? And you might be surprised at what the answer is. So the answer is more like experimenting with something like 4 to 6 times. You can actually see if it has traction versus like one time and it's gone. And seeing if people watch it more than anything else.
Absolutely. I'm learning this in real time. Again, I'm relearning this through YouTube over the last 4 weeks and getting some early wins, mainly because I'm pummeling Oren with questions, who's gone ahead of me. But if you look at a YouTube video I tried a year ago, it was like, oh, day in the life, come to me with these really cool places, like getting a private tour of the Rangers ballpark. Like, people didn't really care about that. It turned out what I figured out of my short form is like, people actually just want to hear me talk about some of the things I have expertise in. I do want to answer, though, the original question, like, so does somebody need a college degree? Well, that all depends. A college degree is still, no matter what, and we're all like, maximizing on different things, a college degree still is the highest level of success if you want to have a predictable earned income and whatnot, so long as you're not taking on insurmountable debt and all that. But the world is changing drastically, and that payoff is now getting really different. So if you have to take on a lifetime worth of debt to get a $40,000 a year job, that's not going to necessarily pay off. But if you are one of these people, let me just show this slide here real quick. This is a slide that I show. If you make things and put it into the world, your example, like this kid here on the left does, I chain signage for companies for free, and he shows the process and then he replaces them. This is like viral content. I guarantee you he's getting a ton of options and a ton of jobs through graphic design. Here was, what was her name? Sorry, Martine Rose was how she originally started, but not Martine Rose. Anyway, she made these planters that are now synonymous with everyone, but she started this basketball planter, phenomenon. And there's all these other guys who are just saying like, hey, here's how I would design something day 30 of making these designs. You can get that stuff in the world and you might be able to get a $40,000 a year job out of that. At the end of the day, in creativity, in the creative realm, your output speaks more than your resume sometimes.
Okay, this is a really good example, and I want to speak to maybe people who are like, okay, like that guy who does the sign redesigns, he's already good at like designing stuff, and so like the content then performs really well. So, there's so many examples of people who are like great graphic designers, and like content is like an amplifying force for what they're putting out there. But I think a kind of like alternative example of this is there's this creator, Girl Boss Town. I don't know her true name, but like she's a pretty big following on TikTok and Instagram, and her like the majority of her content is like, hey, if I'm this brand, like here's the dream collab that I'm doing, and like here's why it makes sense, or like if I'm the Kardashians, like here's what I'm doing. And she's like parlayed that into actual campaigns with really big brands, and like she's become a kind of like art director and creative director on some of those campaigns. And she's putting out the idea and the rationale for why it works, but she's not necessarily saying like, here's exactly how I'm shooting it, and here's like the outputs of my photos and the outputs of my design. It's just like concepting that she's putting out there. So there's a lot of different ways you can execute on this.
I actually feel like, and that's a really interesting point, because I feel too now we're now really inundated with hey, I do X and Y content, or here's a playbook for X and Y, and idea content is kind of like everything, because people are still interested. I think that's going to be like this next, like we're going to see 4 months of like heavy idea content, and then that's going to be washed too. But I think that's kind of where we're at in the social world. But popping into some questions here, Blake asked, and I think this is for Jordan, will Sunday Red exist in 5 years if Tiger doesn't win again? And I think if you want to give some brief Sunday Red context and then and talk a bit about that, it might be an interesting segue.
Ashwin, do you want to break down Sunday Red for us? Just kidding.
What do you think of Tiger's current short game?
Yeah. What will Tiger get his 16th major? Okay. Was Butch Harmon his better coach or Hank Haney? Here we go. So Sunday Red, the Sunday Red is Tiger's brand. He left Nike after 27 years, and this is kind of this new theme that I talk about, where we move from endorsement athletes, where the company is paying an athlete for a set amount of time, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 5 year deal, to promote their products. And then you have these athletes who now want to become equity owners and capitalize upon their own name. And so Tiger left Nike after 27 years to create his own brand called Sunday Red. And I think that but Tiger's at the end of his career. It's very similar to Roger Federer and On, which we may talk about that Zendaya On campaign today. Roger Federer left to get equity in On. I believe the number was like Nike didn't want to pay him. I don't know. He wanted 30 million a year or something, and he was at the end of his career. He went over to On and he made 330 million through the stock options by helping them grow over a course of a few years. And so I think Tiger sees things like that. They will be able to succeed if they can quickly figure out how to utilize Sunday Red to sponsor other athletes who fit kind of Tiger's brief, kind of like the Jordan brand did. But, Tiger's, at the end of his career, and if it is completely reliant upon him showing up and winning at majors, they're not going to go very far. So if I were them, I would do something like, I would go sponsor Stanford, which is the college he went and played at, and there's the feeder system for all the best golfers in the world. I would be looking at like things like that to go capitalize on the next generation. Go ahead.
I was say that there's some other questions stuff coming here. Someone asked about books. If you want to be a creative director, I recommend a book called Fashion Climbing, which is a book. It's a memoir of like a New York City photographer, which really dives into like how you have to network and the things you have to do to like exist with people in a scene. I actually think it's like a really interesting book to kind of talk through for this. But curious if you guys, we might as well do some book recommendations here for the youth.
Ashwin did a video on it last week. I've sent it to people.
I think, yeah. So, I have some like tactical books. This question of like, okay, let me rephrase it to like, okay, do you have books that recommend like how to be a director of a film, right? You're still like creative directing something. And I think there's so many different entry points again, where it's like, hey, you could read a series of books that are just on like photography of like brands and hotels and like ad campaigns and really dial in that viewpoint and kind of like start building taste around how like ad campaigns should be shot for certain brands, or like what does luxury photography look like, or what does like, fast food photography look like, and just like kind of study that and develop a perspective on it. You could also go super tactical and read books like Scientific Advertising, which teaches you like the art of copywriting and what good copywriting versus bad copywriting looks like. So it's really that question of what is that like initial entry point? Is it photography? Is it typography? Is it just like marketing and kind of like branding as a whole? So I would almost say kind of whatever inspires you. I mean, there's I was always inspired by this brand by Muji, and so the creative director there, this guy Kenya Hara, has this book Designing Design, which is this like really fat book, which is just his design philosophy on things and like the art of simplicity and minimalism and why Muji was built that way. Reading that book doesn't necessarily make you a good creative director by any means, but it's like, wow, I've now gone through 500 pages of his insight and wisdom on why it made sense for Muji. And it's like, okay, that's how you can begin thinking about something like this.
Totally.
Maybe, yeah. Jordan, what you got in the book recommendations list?
I don't have a lot, man. I think I've only read one marketing book in my life, and that was Story Brand. When I became
pure historical fiction, just all World War II literature.
Achilles, the Odyssey taught me a lot about
War and Peace. Yeah, there's a lot of Tolstoy in the Rogers household.
I mean, I try to. So Story Brand for me was actually really good as a business owner to understand the how brands tell their story and the arc. You have a hero and all that. I read that last year to help me try to communicate better and actually help me kind of very tactically, like, how do you lay up a web page to tell people about yourself and your brand. And so, I kind of go on some of the more ethereal stuff. Like I studied psychology, sociology, human evolution. All of this tells you about the motivations of human beings. And then marketing is nothing more than trying to capture their attention, tell stories, and move people in a direction. So like what motivates them? That's kind of that macro stuff that unfortunately is a little more, in the gray area and not as tactical, but that's kind of how I learned. So
you're recommending a theology degree is what I hear.
A theology degree. No, not at all. I got a degree in ancient history though, and it turned out okay.
Yeah. So like, all right, so let's double click on that real quick. So ancient history, like how ancient are we talking? Yeah.
We're talking like the Achilles. My wife's actually
Sumerian?
reading a book on Achilles. Sumerian, yeah, we read the Sumerian text and all that, bro. We can go deep if we want. But
Ashwin, have you studied Sanskrit or any of the dead languages?
No,
Or
no, I've not.
Aramaic? Yeah.
look, I've got Julius Caesar on my arm. You know, like I studied.
Man's got the Grecian tattoo. Yeah, you're like the original based.
I'm ready. All right, we've got a couple of things. We should hit some of these things in culture this week. I mean, I've got Charlie XCX, Oren, you've done a video on it. I've seen now the meme culture that's adopted it. You can break that down if you want. Or Ashwin has gone to Paris. He is now flaming the logo this morning. Where do we want to start? I've got On pulled up if we want to look at that. Where do you guys
let's start with Paris. Ashwin, get the scene report. What did you see on the street? Were the youth really wearing Veja like 24/7? What do we see?
So I'll tell you what I saw. So two things, and I made a video about the Paris Olympics logo. We'll get into that in a second. You know, two things that are really interesting that I saw a number of times in Paris was whenever they're rebuilding buildings, they're scaffolding covers. Like in New York, you'll see scaffolding covers, just like green scaffolding everywhere. There, they'll have like kind of full plastered screens that will mimic the edifice of the building, so it looks pretty seamless. Like you can't see the construction going on behind that. But then also, what they'll do is they will just like slide in like ads and billboards that are like very, you know, aesthetically done well. So in that vein, I saw this. I saw this Gucci campaign. So Gucci has this campaign where they're saying Gucci is a feeling, and they just had these huge billboards like right across the Seine. And you know, it's interesting because I'm there. I'm walking with my wife, and Oren's about to say like, when you say my wife, like that's the best hook that I have. Anyway, I see these, right? And my wife sees these and she's like, wow, I really love that, because like Gucci is a feeling. And I look at that and I'm like, I really hate that. And she's like, well, why do you hate it? Because like, that's right. It's like this feeling of winning and all this stuff. And my take on this is it's similar to luxury brands. When a luxury brand has to say their luxury or their quality, they're not. And so when you have to say so explicitly as a luxury brand that Gucci is a feeling, it almost cheapens the fact that it is that feeling. It's a little bit too on the nose for me. And the feeling should be communicated through the visual direction. So that was my take on why I dislike this, but curious to hear what you guys think.
So a couple notes. First, they owe Gucci Mane his flowers, because it's Gucci is 1000% responsible for this. And if this was the same campaign and it was like a Spring Breakers clip, then I'd be all in. But yeah, like I feel like with luxury in general, every time a luxury brand says the word luxury, it troubles me, because like that should be implied. Like luxury is not in saying the word luxury. It is in every little small decision that goes into the storytelling of it, right? It's like everything from your art direction to whatever's pictured in the scene, to the model's choice, to the font, like that is what makes something luxury. And when you have to tell someone that, it means that you're not communicating it well enough through the other. And that's the same thing here, where it's like that photo of him communicates that Gucci like might be a feeling, but then laying that on top of it is really hitting people over the head. But I would then counteract this. Like if you're Gucci and you're trying to prepare for the Paris Olympics, how are you properly communicating the current state of the brand, right? Where you're post Alessandro, who's now gone to Valentino and is doing his like, you know, closet of peculiar toys playbook over there that's almost exactly the same. And now you're trying to kind of reinstate, you know, the brand. What are you doing to present yourself in the Paris Olympics in this kind of setting?
Well, you know, the challenge of jumping into the sports world for them is that I actually had a video that did quite well on this, because the fashion purists were wanting to know why Gucci created a Nike ad with Yannick Sinner here, because his Nike gear is so prominent in every one of these shots that they're using. And the downside of, you know, these sports marketing deals is that they've signed him, I think, for like bag wear only, and Nike's got him covered head to toe, so they can't show him in anything other than Nike. He's not allowed to be shown as long as he's on a tennis court.
Gucci's overestimating the Nike's current brand, brand sentiment with the European youth. Oh, actually, that reminds us, Bima's not here today because the word in the street is that Nike Boeinged Bima. So if you see him, if he's around, put an APB out. We want to make sure that that he's still alive and he hasn't been done dirty by the corporate sportswear
entities. Both Bima and I are on the hit list right now. Secretly by the C-suite, although the people are with us. We're starting a revolution, so they're rallying behind us.
I think Carl in the comments here actually has a good counterpoint to this, which is he's like, I myself would typically frown at that Gucci is a failing copy myself, but I think in this setting it makes sense because you can't assume that the target audience would just get the picture, and especially when the brand is a luxury brand and it's not really a sports brand or like thought about in those contexts. I think that is there's also this like important counter to balance, which is like you always want, for the most part, you want to be clear over being clever. And so if you see just Gucci over this picture of this guy, right, how many people are stopping and like analyzing what does this picture mean? And, you know, it's this kind of like subliminal like messaging or priming. And is that really coming across? And so is it really that harmful for you to say Gucci is a feeling, and maybe that actually works better for the majority person who's like going by and they're like, oh, I get it. And then I tie that in with that image. Okay, cool. So that would be the counter argument to my argument too. And there's, you know, totally a fair point that it's like, hey, you're just being too precious about this.
Yeah. Speaking of precious, all right, we got to talk about On and Zendaya. I have a really quick, I want to hear y'all's perspective on this because I have been with the detective sleuth. I'm gonna bring this video up while I'm talking about it.
She won't post.
She won't post. That's my beef right now, which is
So Federer posted. So for context for people, so On, we all know On. Everyone's mother and father were wearing On. Now they've shifted down to be more acceptable. They sponsored Zendaya, which is what it is to talk about. But they made a post with Roger Federer, right? He posted. It's a co-post with On. She's not involved, which is like the third time she's in a campaign with them where she isn't posting, which to me just basically means that like they got the sponsorship contract and they were like, look, we can afford this, but we can't afford to have any in-feed posts as part of this deal. But I don't know. Do you guys see it differently? And also, does it matter, or is it like we're telling Roger Federer's audience that we have Zendaya is the plan?
But no, I mean, this is where I wanted y'all's opinion genuinely. I believe that this contract would be, I don't want to say useless, without social assets. You are buying her 178 million followers is what they need. They need her to be like jazzed about the brand. And my question for y'all is like, I've seen the Super Bowl research and statistics that when you do celebrity-driven advertisements, people aren't actually remembering the brand, they remember the celebrity. And so I'm so socially deep and native that I believe this is not worth the squeeze if you don't have her participating and being an advocate for the brand.
And also, I haven't seen On yet until that, and like the little logo on the skirt. It's like that's an ad for tennis.
You know, true. So I'm curious, like, you know, Ashwin, I'm sure you have hot takes on these things, but let me know. I mean, like, that, to me, it's not worth it if she's not sharing on social, and she has yet to share anything, literally not even a story, repost, or anything to her 183 million followers.
Yeah, I'm curious about this. You know, someone in the comments, Domenico, says she will post in August. I'm curious if there's some inside baseball there or what's going on. You know, is there something going on where she's not posting now because like, hey, let's let the campaign like drum up some volume and noise, and then I'm going to remind people, you know, 3 months out, but I don't want to be posting, you know, every week leading up to those 3 months. So is there a post coming from her in social? I'm not sure. I don't know the nuances of this contract. But yeah, I would find her social posting and kind of integration with this like pretty important.
Now Roger Federer has 12 million.
So, but is it? So I know it's important. It's important to access that, but think of it the brand from the other shoes. If you're like, all right, cool, this is I'm throwing numbers out there. This is a $10 million deal for us to be able to sponsor Zendaya. We can use her likeness, but she won't post on her social. And it's a $25 million deal if we want to be able to have the social posts integrated. And you're like, oh man, that's too much. Now I'm just saying say that with the way the algorithms work. Is it more beneficial for them to be like, guess what? We can post on with our couple million because she's in it. We're going to get way more reach and our content's going to do way better because of the natural virality of having her included and associated. And so we don't want to take the upwards of that fee because we know the algorithms are going to basically do that work for us. You know, is that a approach worth taking?
Is the algorithm of On running, which is basically affluent moms and dads, going to reach Zendaya's audience, which is
Well, I
why
do
they
think with
tried
the
to
way
sign her?
TikTok and Instagram work, they're going to get the content to the people that are designed to see it, right? So basically, it's going to show it to your audience for a chunk, and then it's going to take it into Reels. If you take anything into Reels for someone with the size of Zendaya's audience, maybe it's kind of growing it beyond that. I'm just curious, you know.
If Zendaya posted it, but I mean, and yes, you can get there through paid and targeted media, but the authenticity and the organic is what you're really going for. So for me, a brand that's making billions, Oren, the extra 15 million, easy for me to say, it's not my budget, but like the extra 15 million,
numbers are.
Yeah, I would actually be curious too. And everybody's acting like we don't know that that's a separate carve out in the deal. Of course, it's a freaking separate carve out, but that's why in this age of social media, that's what you're paying for. You know, I mean, I don't know what this gets them if she is not co-signing it in today's day and age.
Yeah,
but,
and I do find it interesting what Alice says here. She's like, personally, I don't stand as a consumer. I'm supposed to take away from a Federer Zendaya ad, which is exactly the response I had, where I'm like, he's a pro tennis player. She's a celebrity that was in a tennis movie. They're playing tennis, which doesn't seem like that would be a fun game for anyone involved. And I guess, and it is a conversation starter, right? But like, it doesn't seem like a thought through conversation starter.
It's air tennis, or not just any tennis, air tennis.
Yeah.
So they don't actually play with a ball. I mean, I think it's like fine to have that connection point from her movie to him. But yeah, Oren, is it you who said you'd find it much more entertaining if he came into her world versus her coming into his?
No, I didn't say it, but that's fantastic. And
that's like really funny, right? Yeah. What you know, if they pulled him into Zendaya's world, it would be
he's just like on a Valentino shoot, like you know, like being like, is someone gonna be a Perrier? You know,
working with her stylist. Her stylist is like putting him in Valentino would be amazing. I don't know, Ashwin, you tell me.
Yeah, I think if you know, we're throwing out hypothetical numbers of like 10 versus 25, and I don't think that would actually be the delta. If it was that delta, it's like all day long I'm taking the 10 million. I don't care about social posts from her. I just don't care, because like for that additional $15 million, if I can use her likeness and out of home stuff, it's like, okay, fine. On the digital side, I'm going to put $1 million behind paid, and I'm going to get probably the same amount of reach. I'll pay millions of dollars in influencers and PR to like boost the campaign and get other people talking about it. I will get so much more exposure talking about the fact that Zendaya is involved with On than Zendaya herself talking about On, when I'm looking at her reels right now. And I'm looking at her reels and I'm like, I don't even know how she organically integrates this, because she's not, from what I can tell from her reels, like face the camera, like, hey guys, this is like, it's not like Alex Earl style, right? Where that like hit is like, hey, I'm partnering with Amino Lean and like, now you should go buy this product. Her stuff is like a little bit more like artistic. It's short. It's like, she's not really talking in any of them.
Like little fashion films. But also, so here's my pitch. If I'm on and I want to do a celebrity campaign like this, I'm like, hey, I don't actually want shooting the social media content. I want a weekend, and I want you, Roger Federer. Give me a couple other wash guys. Give me Zendaya. Give me Paige Lorenz. Give me all of them, and we're doing a literal tennis tournament at our Hamptons house or whatever, and we're going to show the actual results. Like, I want to see Roger Federer like being like, all right, I'm going to give a 50%. Against like doing like 1v2 against like Zendaya and her trainer. Like, give me content that, like, you're watching being like, oh shit, you know, like give me some competition. I feel like you could have turned this into an experiential versus like a fake story, and like that's what people want. Give me the Tart Island of On, Zendaya, Roger Federer, and like I'm there.
Yes, so good.
Wow. Yeah, that would be incredible. They did get like a half day with her. If people don't know, like, so this Vogue piece was the lead, which, Oren, we should talk about what do they still have
last remaining publications that actually has some clout. All right, man, I can't keep going.
They got Sha'Carri Richardson recently, you know, ahead of the Olympics.
Also, so here's the thing: is like, so media, traditional PR is terrible and dead, unless, and there's only two scenarios I can think of that will drive this. There's probably a few others, like where it's basically it's the cut. You know, and Vogue have a cottage industry of creators that just talk about whoever just went on Vogue or The Cut if an article kind of goes viral. And so basically you get a creator boost simply by debuting something on there, because there's this cottage industry of people that are like, new Vogue article, blank. And basically every other publication from Wired to whatever just essentially is just gone to the point where those views don't even matter. But Vogue, you can still get that impact from.
Yeah. Well, they did it right. I mean, for those who don't know, basically On coordinates this. Really, look at that. You see that? So it's like That is not something On wanted to include.
You hit last week where it was like it was the Nike ad with the influencer where the girl's talking about wearing her running shoes to like the market after or whatever. It's just like, this is just not, it's so inauthentic.
Yeah.
And like, and if it's inauthentic, lean into it. It's be like, oh, you don't exercise much, so On's helping her exercise or whatever. It is. You like the narrative is just completely missing, and something that we could all solve in about like 45 seconds.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I assure you that's not something On wanted to keep in the Vogue piece, but there's this like give and take when you do these PR coordination. So,
but then they don't run with that. They'd be like, so you can't get, if I'm an On creator and I'm like, hey, cool, like, I guess what we announced about, she said she didn't really exercise. We made this exercise plan if she was going to start, and like, here's what it looks like, and here's our 6 week if we were Zendaya getting into marathon shape. I'm like, again, it's just everything's a concept. Like, let's go. Yeah,
you could bring people along and go, this is Zendaya's workout, strategy now that we're bringing along with her.
See, that's the type of thing that I wonder, like, there's probably been either some people at the agency or in-house at On who like probably had a very similar conversation. They're like, dude, Zendaya doesn't like really run. Oh, what if we lean into that really creative idea? And then it's like, you go to committee. And then everyone's like, no, that's like too risky. We can't do that because we're paying so much for this. How can she admit that she doesn't work out that much? And it's like, you don't realize that's
might as well get some value back.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of having this like contrived 40-second bit of her playing with Roger Federer.
Why play by the rules, right? Like, so this happened, and you're like, oh God, well, committee, we can't say that, and she said this, and it's like, cool. Guess what? Go slide 40 racks to whatever 2 creators to do the series for you, to like make fun of the scenario, to do the X. No one has to know. Dark money, different budget. Like, no one put the 2 and 2 together. You have a cottage industry of the internet to go tell whatever story you want, and they could, like, it's, I don't know.
Okay, speaking of cottage industry of telling the internet what you want, that's a good segue to Charlie XCX, I think. Oren, she's got I think 75 million streams on her debut album, just on Spotify alone. I think.
Not a debut. We're deep in the Charlie XCX career, but on this summer's album, this has now officially jumped the shark from thing that was cool, that was like a moment that everyone was into, to now it has gone to mainstream, to the point where like it may almost be a negative, which is interesting for something that's like was so cult. But yeah, basically the branding and marketing of this campaign for an album that is okay but not amazing has essentially turned her into Lady Gaga with like of our time, which is amazing, and she deserves it because she's an incredible artist. But like, it's very interesting about literally like the rollout and the theme and the ability to capture on the cultural zeitgeist and the ability to create memetics around it with with the look and feel, have just like escalated something into a cultural moment. And like, that is something that is achievable for essentially anyone with a platform who puts enough intention into it, which I think is really interesting.
So she's got a generator that people can generate anything they want with this kind of
with aerial, narrow, blurry on a really specific shade of green. And that launched with it. It was part of the campaign. And then but even the terminology, even like that word applying into this. And so it was a thing, and it was a thing inside like the niche communities that she's big for. And I call this out when I did a video on it, but she like, the rollout of this was like super strategic, right? Big cultural moment. She does Boiler Room. Everyone who knows what they're talking about is like, oh, cool, she's doing Boiler Room, it's cool. They had like 5 or 6 little like specifically designed like meme things that came out of that then got like a certain level of cultural attention. And then they moved into this rollout that is very, think of how like Nicki Minaj had that stuff with whatever her fans were all making the Pink Friday AI stuff. Like, I think this was definitely, there was someone in a room being like, oh, we saw what happened there. Let's give people a similar toolkit where they can use a color and a thing. And then it's, but the thematic plus the mimetic plus the rollout, plus the general like nailing of like what's going on in the zeitgeist, everyone wanting to be outside and like embrace chaos and youth a little bit this summer is great. But now I think it's like it's gone to a point where like it was still at like a very cool, completely saturated level, and now it's like crossed into a mainstream level that is absolutely nuts.
Where we have bratwurst brands capitalizing upon it.
Yeah. And I blame this purely on the success of my LinkedIn video about this from like 3 or 4 weeks ago.
It's happened.
That's how these things happen. If someone's like, I saw this thing on LinkedIn, and like the bratwurst brand is like, run it.
Okay. Fair enough. Anything to add on this, Ashwin? This is a good one.
No, my question to Oren would be, is it okay? Say I'm a brand right now, and I'm pitching like, hey, we're gonna do this like fun little ad, or even like the social post that like taps into this right now today on July 12th. Are we giving that a go or no?
No, we're gonna know it's. I have what I call the torched meter. I post about this a lot, whether something is torched or not. And basically like, And okay, there's two differences between there's washed and torched. Washed is when something is like it's not no longer cool, but something that's washed might still work. Like so, for instance, the Instagram trend where you drop your like Goyard wallet and you use it to show off your shoes or whatever, that's washed. It's not torched because you can still get views, right? Torched means it is both no longer cool and you can't use it to no longer get views. And so I think that as a brand, Brat is torched. You're not going to get more views from it. It's not going to succeed for you, and it does not intrinsically make you cool because you're so far behind. And so I think that it is not a go right now. And in fact, it is. Yeah, it's kind of almost like it's almost shameless. And again, what brands should be thinking about is not like it's how do we get faster at tapping into these cultural moments? And so this is something that like I do a workshop on this with brands where I go like, hey, you need a response mechanism, because what happens is someone on your team saw this 7 weeks ago, and you just decided to act on it now. And so how do you actually work around that, right? Usually you have a Slack channel or whatever it is, your creative team sending stuff back and forth, they're dropping links in. And the problem with those Slack channels for 99% of these companies is no one actually acts, right? And so you need to make a framework for that. And so I give people like a 4-step framework, and it's like, is this a relevant thing that we think is ending? Is this a relevant thing that we think is starting? Like that's framework 1. If it's starting, all right, cool. Is it the right thing for us to act on, or is it not the right thing for us to act on, and why? And then if the answer is no to either of those questions, it's like, hey, if this is already done, then cross it off. If it's not for us, cross it off. If it's just starting and it's relevant for us, then it's like, what is our action? And if you can just look at all these things that people share through that lens, all of a sudden you've got like a decision matrix to be able to go like, let's get a campaign out. But that's what most companies are missing, and allow them to actually make cultural moves like this and enable their more culturally savvy people to have a forum with which to place those ideas that get acted
on. Preach, brother. Man, you just outlined how corporations or anyone could actually remain relevant.
I got to stop doing it on these because I get paid to do that. But here
that's
we
true.
are.
I know. We got to stop giving away all this free game. It's true. But it's often too late by the time you get through the cultural, but the bureaucracy at a corporation, it's too late and it's torched, and then you don't gain anything from it. You're just a little late to the party.
Yeah, but it's not torched. If you're a brand out there being like, Brat's torched, for me as a brand, if you are a person or you are in Brat culture, post away. I'm talking purely as a brand. But if you are if you're a brand and you're looking for something to still act on, like there's still time. Like the torch meter on Aura is at like a 4 of 10, right? You still got time on Aura before like you can still act, so just throwing that out there.
Aura is here. The vibe, the aura is there. All right. We've got some hot takes on the Olympics logo.
Yeah, so Ashwin, you loved this logo, right? Why did you think that this was such a great execution?
I absolutely loved
Ashwin voted for this to be the
you worked on this, right? This was the Forge.
Yeah.
Forge was like one of the contributing agencies. And
we made this. This is my magnum opus. Stopping design work after this. No, the Tropicana guys made this. Okay, so I'm in Paris last week. I see this logo, and this is like kind of the first time I'm seeing it live. Obviously knew the Olympics are going on. I'm looking at this thing and I'm just like, the first thing I think of is like, okay, this is like 2010s dating app. This is like Tinder V1 coming out. This is the mark for it. And I'm just like, this to me, without any knowledge or insight on what this logo means, I'm just like, this is a woman with a bob cut and lips, and like, what does this have to do with the Olympics? It's not really kind of driving home for me. And you look at like the history of Olympic logos, and it's like some kind of like movement of a person or an athlete in the kind of Olympic ring colors, with some kind of like iconic silhouette from that place. So you think like Sydney Olympics was kind of in the silhouette of the Sydney Opera House, kind of loosely, and you see this person in motion. And it's like, all right, that makes a lot of sense. And like, listen, some of these are bad, some of these are good, but I see this one and I'm like, oh, this just looks like early 2010 dated digital design. What is the meaning behind this person and so on. So made this video, obviously just like tearing it down, having fun with it. But I think what's interesting about this is if you watch their actual video for announcing this, they say, hey, there's 3 things that we tried to blend with this, which is the Olympic flame, which great, you can see, a gold medal, which like, I don't know, that's not really coming across here. That's a little bit of a stretch for me. It's just a circle. And then third, Marianne, who is like the symbol of France. And there are like busts and images of Marianne that, have a crown, that are intricate, that are super unique. And there is this is such an abstraction of it that I don't even know how one, looks at this and says, hey, that's the represent. That's like,
so perhaps they should have engaged a popular branding creator, Indian descent, to help tell the story of how the inspiration arrived to where it was that maybe millions of people would have seen. I don't know.
Yes. It's exactly what they should have done.
Yeah, Mary, I didn't even know that was the tie-in there.
I didn't either.
I think that's the hard part of, again, being too
that's some friendship, bro. Straight up. You know what I mean? Like, they just doing too much. You know what I mean? Like, no one gives a shit about your fucking subculture.
Like, who's going to notice that? Who's going to know that? People are going to look at that and be like, what is this like? What does this chick have to do with the Olympics? And like, why
just put a cappuccino on a cup and put a flame in it and fucking run that shit. You know what I mean?
Honestly, make it a croissant.
The Paris croissant logo would have gone. It would honestly would have gone if they did like a coquette croissant with like the Olympic, like an Olympic bow. It would have been a wrap. Just saying. The Olympic circles were all bows.
Wait. Actually, we need to put a cigarette, which we do need to talk about at some point. Put a cigarette in their mouth would be good. A little Parisian wee wee.
There's so much rich visual history and kind of like iconic ideas to pull from, and iconic like graphic design
styles to pull cigarettes, from. Bread, guillotines. The guillotine logo.
Oh, wait. By the way, have you guys seen Louis Vuitton is getting in the game here? They're going to do the medal stand. Unclear whether they're doing the medals themselves or.
Well, no, so they do the trophies and stuff. They're just doing the tray for this, but they do trophies for and trophy cases in particular for almost everything. Like the trophy cases for Louis Vuitton is an entire cottage industry.
Yeah, for NBA they do that for the finals trophy. Not sure who else, but this one looks actually pretty sick.
Yeah, so they do even like the Stanley Cup like has a case, and they had the whole. I did a video on this back in the day that actually did really well, and but they have like a whole industry of like every trophy that you've ever imagined is somehow encased in Louis Vuitton. It was interesting. It was funny to think about. I was at the homie Victor Solomon's yesterday, which is why I'm wearing the celebratory goggles. Indeed. But he was preparing to take the trophies to Summer League, so I'm like at his facility, and he's got like the Summer League trophies out. And it's just really interesting that we have like a new. Like there's like a new generation of like trophy design. Like he does like WNBA trophies, NBA trophies, like all this kind of stuff happening, and like this whole like reincarnation, where he's redone like a bunch of these. And it's like a guy who you can follow on social media who is like relatively available and like super nice. And but I love that idea that like he not only has like remade these modern trophies, but then he has like viral stuff. Like again, it's like cool when they were popping the champagne, they're wearing like his collaborative like champagne goggle. And I was just like, it's really nice that there is a generational representative like of this kind of stuff like happening right now who's like doing something new for that. And it's crazy that like that should come to the Olympics as well. Like the NBA is always ahead of that kind of stuff. But I really think there's an opportunity there for like, what does celebration look like in this era? And like, what are the fun viral moments that come from that? And celebration is such a exciting concept that I feel like it should get leaned into more.
Yeah, this is super sick. And I love seeing kind of the intersection of these like creators and, amazing. I mean, dude, Victor Solomon's created just a whole niche industry for himself.
So this is super interesting, especially as we're talking about Louis Vuitton. Like, is Louis Vuitton designing the medals? Oh, they design like the cases or stands behind that. That's to me like really interesting content that I, as just an average person, or I as even someone who like pays attention to branding, has never even like thought about or considered. I remember doing this this project with TikTok last year, and TikTok was putting together a report on how brands should be thinking about content creation for the Olympics. They were teeing it up a year in advance, and they're like, here's how you tap into the trends and the moments, right? And so you have this cultural thing going on, which is like Olympics and sports. And so people would think like, oh, okay, it makes sense if like Nike's creating content around this, or like sports and athletic brands are creating content around this. But a kind of like hidden idea in there that I think is really important is that no matter what brand you are, what category that you're in, there's an angle in which you can tie into a lot of what's happening in the Olympics to kind of like tie it back with your brand and be culturally relevant in that way. So if you are a clothing brand, if you like make men's clothing, it's like, great, let's do a breakdown of like all of the Olympic attires from, opening ceremony for different teams. Where's this stuff sourcing from? How are they making it? What is the longevity of the stuff? How does someone even get the contract behind this? It's not necessarily about your brand, but you're tapping into the conversation around fashion during the Olympics, which is like what you need to be doing and kind of thinking about. I'm curious if you guys have any like takes or thoughts on that.
Well, I love that idea. Like, so think about second screening that. Like, so this whole idea, I love. One of these ideas I was talking to Jordan about yesterday that I absolutely love is that like Peyton Manning and his brother, I think, have like a separate NFL cast where you can basically watch the traditional announcers, or you can watch Peyton Manning and his brother, and like, and it's like a funny kind of alternative version. But like, okay, do you want to watch the Olympics and have like whatever weird guys are announcing the Olympics, or do you want to watch like the Brand Brothers version of that stream, right? We're second screen doing exactly what Ashwin said, being like, oh, and we, you prep, you get the information, you can actually go through. Here's what it costs to get the deal. Let's go through 6 years of Ralph Lauren's outfits for Team USA. Here's why this Pata collab was blank. Here's why this isn't relevant. Like that, I think is like the commentary of that and the ability to provide, as long as you have an ability to distribute that accordingly, so many people are second screening now. So many people are on Twitch tuning into this kind of live stream, doing that I think that's where brands can really shine, is by creating that companion content to this for people with a specific interest.
Yeah, I mean, Olympics, holler at us. Brand Brothers are available to come to Paris.
And if you are a tier below the Olympics, toward like localized cricket, like I honestly, high school football, we would smash, like Sierra Canyon basketball. We're ready.
Guys, come to Texas. We'll go do high school football in Cowboy Stadium.
Yeah, Friday Night Lights being like, that guy looks like an anti-athlete.
Friday Night Lights. We'll break down all the brand deals. Although Texas is not one of the 37 states that allows high school NIL deals and marketing deals yet. They'll get there eventually.
Wow. And speaking of streaming, it was interesting. We have 630 concurrent people or whatever on this live stream now. And you gain momentum the longer you're on. And it was funny. I was looking at Twitch, and this is the first one we're doing on also has a Twitch component. I don't know if anyone's watching on Twitch. If you are, feel free to drop a comment. But what's interesting to me is like the momentum it takes for that. Like the recommended time for a Twitch stream, like a default Twitch stream, is 4 hours. And even I was talking to someone yesterday about streaming and like how trying to improve it. And they're like, hey, well, really you starting to get momentum at like an hour. 2 hours in is probably when you're going to get your peak concurrent viewers. And you're just like, that's just a commitment. Like, I feel like we're 50 minutes into this, and you're like, man, like 10 left. Can you imagine doing that for 4 hours? I don't know, it's just my rant.
Well, I do think that past the second stream would make it interesting. Like, we're pulling all the topics like retroactively from the last week that we've been seeing. If you do have some focal point that is there and you could discuss, it could be really interesting. So actually, we're thinking of doing live streams starting at night next week. We're going to test times. If y'all are in the comments here, let us know when you would actually tune in live. Is Friday at lunchtime actually good for you, or to start the day, or would you rather like at nighttime? Give us some ideas. Or
we know y'all ain't working on Friday anyway. You know what I mean? Totally. So yeah, millennials ain't doing that shit. Summer Fridays out here,
Summer Fridays, baby. No doubt. Let's see. What else did we have? We got any questions we need to plunge? We got the team plunge here. I've already done my first cold plunge of the day. The Brand Brothers would definitely like we can do a cold take of the week segment. We can do a sauna hot takes.
There we go.
The Brand Brothers.
I like cold take of the week. Let's go.
Yeah, totally. We're here. I actually think Plunge is pretty genius on their like influencer marketing on a high dollar point item. Like, people do not understand the power of just seeding and in influencer marketing. I think a lot of people make it a way too formal. Like, here's your press kit. Like, this is what you should post, when and where. I see Plunge as like just seeding everybody in the fitness influence landscape and trying to like get critical mass. And it's pretty wild. It just goes to show that no matter how high you are, that getting the product in the right hands of the right people still has huge impact. And it doesn't have to be like this super formalized contractual agreement, but like just getting it in the hands of people still to this day is so powerful.
Well, I will say, like, there's something to be said about a high value item too. When you get something expensive, and I think we're all on this boat, you're like, shit, I really got to post some fucking content about this, versus like when you get like a t-shirt and you're like, like, and so there's something to be said for like, you're like, hey, I kind of want to fulfill my end of the bargain, which is an interesting concept. But also something brands don't do that. It's another thing I'm like constantly doing with brands whenever I go in is like, give people ideas, right? Like, I get seeded stuff all the time where it's just like, here's a thing. And, but if someone's like, hey, here's the last 10 creator things, and like, here's what went viral, or like, here's how some like banger content fucking things we'd love to see done. Look, I might not do them, but I'm definitely interested to see him. And if it's a good idea and I'm like, oh, I could cut that in, X amount of time, like, hell yeah, I'd rather try that. Like, I don't know, make influencers' lives easier. Don't be like, here's this crazy press kit or whatever, but be like, here's a couple things that have worked prior. And here's a couple ideas of things that we're seeing on social now related in our niche that like we can't execute or we'd love someone to execute. And like, no pressure, but just like, here's some of that toolkit. I feel like there's a massive opportunity there just to help make creators' lives easier. Because we're sitting there being like, now I got to come up with a whole concept. I got to do X or Y. How do I fit this into my programming? But if you're like, oh shit, like I could just do that thing that everyone else is doing that's popping, but I have an audience for it. Let's go.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think to Jordan's point, I think two things, right? There are brands that certainly understand like the importance and value of like seeding and gifting and like doing that with like micro creators as well as macro creators. There's like there's the analog experience of this, right? Like the real life experience of this. If you look at like any food or beverage company, I mean, like Red Bull is like key for this, right? Like one of their KPIs is just like cans in hands. So they'll get like the Red Bull girls and the Red Bull car just on college campuses handing out Red Bull nonstop because they know it's just like products in hands drives trial. And so if the cost of doing that is low enough, like we don't need to measure attribution one-to-one, but if we know, hey, 20% of people who try Red Bull convert, okay, for a cost of $100,000, that's going to drive, $500,000 in yearly value in this region. Great. Let's like run that playbook in so many places. That's like the analog component of sampling. And that's like a tale as old as time. But the digital example is, I think where a lot of people get hung up is, hey, if you're a brand, if I need to go partner with Jordan or Oren or me, we're going to like command such like high rates to like produce this content. And it's like a lot of back and forth and PR kits and all of this stuff. Sure. That's like one audience and way that you can go do it. The other way that I've done it, and it's like, we do this with Oklahoma Smokes. I do this with my other brand, Sun Powder, is we will go, and it's super manual. We'll go on TikTok or go on Instagram and say, hey, our product solves like these 3 problems. It's like people who want to like quit smoking, people who want to like cut back on smoking weed. Great. Who is making content talking about that stuff? I simply do not care if they have a large following or large audience, but it allows me an entry point to then reach out to them and be like, hey, this is this is our product. This is what we do. We saw the content that you create. We'd love to like send you just like a couple free packs on us. And then it like opens up this conversation with them. Maybe 50% of people who we send product to for a fairly nominal cost end up posting about it. And you don't need every post to go viral, but like the one that does, great, pays back the whole program for the entire year.
Totally.
It's a manual effort. It's a process-oriented effort, but like that's just the playbook. And it's like, I run it here, I run it at multiple companies. Like it just works still.
Yeah. And I just think not enough people understand, like, find the slipstream that these people are already in, and you come alongside the direction they're going. If you keep going upstream against creators and like say, oh, they have a big following, so we want them to post about it, it doesn't make sense. Like I was literally on the phone 30 minutes before this with a shout out Connor at Topgolf. He was like, post whatever you want about this event that they have coming up. He's like, the last thing on earth I would ever tell you to do is like what you should post on your channel. And it was like music to my ear. It's so rare these days. I did want to call out Ashwin. You guys do this Oklahoma Smokes. Tell people a little bit about it. I loved this like free cigs at midnight on a busy street around bars and stuff is just like an amazing hook. And the man on the street stuff I thought was so good. As somebody who used to smoke and wished there was a product like this back when I was trying to quit, this is pretty genius. I love both the concept and the creative that y'all are doing.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, yeah, concept wise, you nailed it. So it's basically they're cigarettes, they're nicotine and tobacco free. They're made with CBD, so it's just hemp flower in there. And it's like our tagline is like kick the habit, keep the ritual. And so this is very much like, hey, you have people who are smokers. Like going cold turkey has like a fairly low success rate. Switching to completely different form factors, gums, pouches, etc., has a relatively low success rate. And so if you look at like the actual habits of smokers who are smoking, like doing this one action 20 times a day, it's like, that's my smoke break. That's when I'm talking to my friends. I do it when I'm drinking. It's like my moment of stress relief. Great. You kind of, to your point, meet people where they are. If you're trying to do behavior change, meet people where they are. So it's like, okay, make the product that smokes like a cigarette, and it doesn't even smoke 1-to-1 like a cigarette, right? It smells differently, it tastes a little bit differently, but like you still can partake in that habit and ritual. So we have this audience that like people who are cigarette smokers who are looking to cut back. We have people who smoke cannabis who are looking to cut back. We have people who are social smokers who don't want to develop addictions who are looking to cut back. And so that is that's like kind of like general high level thinking of the brand and the product, and then how we've thought about content and like why I can speak so maybe confidently about like influencer seeding and like the content strategies that we've employed is we have a smokable product that is a CBD product. Those two things is like the perfect intersection of where you cannot run paid ads on digital, right? So I would not recommend anyone go start a smokable brand or a CBD brand and try to like build an e-commerce business. But as a result of that constraint, we had to get really creative around the content that we create, right? Or how do we organically create word of mouth like at scale? So it's a ton of seeding. It's a ton of getting creative with content in the street where it's like, hey, I'm doing this one-to-one sampling with someone. Okay, now I start this interaction and dialogue with them where they say like, oh, why would I ever smoke this? Doesn't have nicotine. Like I want the nicotine. And then it allows us to educate, but in a way that's less so like, hey, me getting on camera, telling you exactly what the product is, which admittedly I did for quite a long time, like 2020 and 2021, but it's like evolving that content slowly over time too.
Super smart. I used to always say, I don't want a nicotine. I never, after a meal, I don't say, gosh, I want nicotine in my bloodstream. I think I want to smoke something. And so it's such a great idea. We think handwritten signs, yes, torched for memes, but still effective. They've been around for thousands of years to go all the way back to ancient history.
It's the video series. It's torched if you're a guy holding sign meme, you know?
Yeah. Person holding sign, not here. All right, guys, we're coming up on time. Anything else that we've missed or forgotten?
We're going to stream at night next week on a random night. It's called we're going to call it Midnight Stand Up. It's just going to be, we're going to run through all our KPIs. We're going to do agile. We'll see. We'll look at Ashwin's Git commits for the week. Jordan's going to break down Kubernetes. It's going to be great. Yeah,
it's going to be great. Y'all send us though for real. Like we're trying to figure out when. So we're thinking Thursday night. Bima has been. We're not sure where Bima is.
Yeah. We think he's been Boeinged by Nike, but we'll find out.
We think he's been Boeinged. We're not sure. He did some he's been capping on a lot of big sneaker brands. So Bima should be back next week. We hope. We're adding a sister any day. We've been trying to reach out. We've been trying to find some guests. We're getting ghosted, guys. Okay, we appreciate everybody for tuning in. Any closing thoughts here, gentlemen?
I got 10 o'clock. I'm a holler, y'all.
That's it. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Okay. Bye, everybody.